After Maggie died, it was like I disappeared. Not physically, no, my body still wandered the dusty rooms of our old house in Nebraska. But my soul had hidden itself somewhere deep between memories and pain. For 2 months, I didn't step outside. The curtains stayed shut, the phone was unplugged, the calendar thrown to the floor. The only thing I held onto, day after day, was a glass of gin. Sometimes with a slice of lemon, more often just ice and emptiness. Sometimes I'd sit in the old rocking chair on the porch, staring at the dusty road stretching out front, sipping and drifting. Other times, I'd just lay flat on the couch, staring at the ceiling. And every single day, I could feel something inside me breaking a little more. Without her, life had no shape, no taste. Maggie had been my sun, my habit, my air. When she left, I realized I was trapped in a place with no map, no exit. And then one morning came. I woke up in a bed that felt too big, too cold. My head throbbed with a dull, merciless pain. My joints ached like I'd run a marathon. My back burned, and every breath weighed heavy in my chest. When I stood up, my legs shook beneath me. I stumbled into the bathroom and, passing the cracked mirror, I stopped. Looked. And staring back at me was an old man. Not me. A gray, swollen, crumpled stranger with hollow eyes. I froze there, gripping the sink, and realized something: 6 more months of this, and I'd be buried next to Maggie. And even if I had the nerve to let it happen, I knew deep down, I'd never forgive myself. She wouldn't have wanted this. I turned on the cold water, scooped a handful, and splashed my face. Then another. And another. Somewhere between those freezing hits, the first clear thought in months rose up inside me: enough. That day, for the first time in 2 months, I poured myself a cup of coffee instead of gin. Real coffee, black, bitter, strong enough to burn the roof of your mouth and drag you back into the world. Sitting there in the kitchen, surrounded by old photographs, empty chairs, and thick silence, I finally asked myself, where do I go from here? After the coffee, I showered. The water washed more than just the grime off me, it stripped away some of the heavy weight I'd been carrying for weeks. I dried off, pulled on a pair of worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, and made a decision: I had to get out of the house. Even if it was just one damn step. There was an old, rusted playground down the road, nothing but a few broken pull-up bars and a cracked climbing frame, overtaken by weeds and rust. I made my way there, slow and stiff. And once I arrived, I stretched, pulled at my shoulders, rotated my arms through the heavy summer air, and squatted down with creaking knees. My body protested, screeched like an old barn door in the wind, but I kept moving. And somewhere between the second and third set of shaky squats, a thought hit me: I'm still alive. Heading back home, sweat soaking my shirt, legs trembling but heart stubbornly steady, I passed by the little corner store. I was dying for a cold bottle of water. And that's when I saw it. Parked outside the store was a bike. A real deal, badass Harley Davidson. Old, but polished to a mirror shine. Its chrome caught the sunlight and threw it straight into my eyes, making me squint and smile without thinking. I don't know how long I stood there staring. Maybe a minute. Maybe an hour. Old memories came rushing back, uninvited but welcome: Maggie and me, barefoot and wild, riding her brother's old bike down dirt roads. Her laughter ringing in my ears as she yelled for me to go faster. The river where we'd stopped to swim, hair drying in the open sun, not a care in the world. And right there, standing in the heat outside that little store, I thought, maybe it's time to try again. Maybe if I couldn't live the way I used to, I could still find a new way to live. I bought a bottle of water, sat down on a bench across from the Harley, and drank slowly, never taking my eyes off it. And somewhere deep inside, a plan began to stir. I came home a different man. And it wasn't because I spent half an hour at the old playground or swapped gin for coffee. It was because of a thought that had sunk its teeth into my brain and refused to let go: I needed a motorcycle. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, while pictures spun through my mind: open roads, the heat on my skin, the roar of an engine, and the wind punching me full in the face. I thought about my younger days. Days when life felt endless, when every turn of the handlebars opened a brand new chapter. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt alive. But then reality knocked. How the hell was I going to pay for a bike? No way I could afford a new one. And honestly, why would I want to? I wasn't planning to tear down the highway at 120 miles an hour, trying to impress kids half my age. I needed a bike with soul. Something old, something loud, something with chrome worn down by the years. I went out to the garage. There, under a thick layer of dust, sat my old Ford F-150, the same pickup Maggie and I used for farmers markets, fishing trips, and Sunday drives. Since she died, I hadn't even turned the key once. Hadn't had the heart, or the need. I stood there for a long while, running my hand over the cracked, faded paint. And then I understood, it was time. Time to let go. The next day, I put the truck up for sale. Found a buyer pretty quick, a neighbor kid who needed a sturdy old workhorse for hauling hay and feed. I sold it for next to nothing, and I didn't regret it for a second. It was a fair trade. I was giving up a piece of my old life to buy myself a shot at a new one. Then came the hunt for the bike. I spent days online, clicking through listings, reading reviews, weighing my options. And one morning, there it was, a 1998 Harley-Davidson Softail Standard, black with a silver stripe down the tank, original chrome, leather seat, good condition. Not a bike, a song. I called the seller, set up a meeting, and 2 days later, that Harley was parked in my driveway. The first time I laid my hands on those handlebars, the first time I heard the engine rumble to life, my heart did a goddamn somersault. That sound, it was better than any symphony. A low, deep growl. A vibration in my fingertips that promised a road beyond the horizon. There was one last thing I needed, gear. I hit up a local second-hand store. Dug through a mountain of junk until I found it, a beat-up brown leather jacket, sleeves cracked with age, still carrying the faint smell of gasoline and rain. A jacket that had clearly seen its share of storms. I bought a pair of worn leather gloves, black boots, and a small backpack, just enough to carry the essentials, a change of clothes, a toothbrush, a first aid kit, and a canteen of water. I didn't make a big plan. No marked routes, no motel reservations, no sightseeing lists. I just packed up, slung the backpack over my shoulders, and stood there facing the Harley. The sun was just beginning to rise over Nebraska, painting the sky with soft pinks and golds. The air was cool and clean, thick with the scent of earth and coming thunderstorms. I looked out at the road stretching toward the horizon, took a deep breath, and fired up the engine. The Harley roared, alive and fierce, like the shout of a brand new morning. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know how many days I'd be on the road. I didn't know what was waiting out there. But I knew one thing for sure, I was headed somewhere I could feel alive again. The first miles were rough. My body ached from months of neglect. My hands cramped gripping the bars. My back screamed from the unfamiliar position. But mile after mile, the pain faded. And something new moved in, something light, something free, something joyful. The wind whistled past my ears. The chrome caught the morning light and threw it back at the sky. Each turn of the wheels felt like a small victory over the life I'd left behind. The depression stayed there, back in the dusty rooms of my old house. And I sped toward the wind, toward whatever was next. That night, I pulled into a roadside motel somewhere beyond the Kansas line. The room was tiny, shabby carpet, rattling air conditioner, but to me, it might as well have been a 5-star suite. I collapsed onto the bed, closed my eyes, and smiled. For the first time in months, I drifted off not under the weight of sadness but with a heart light as air. The road lay ahead. And so did everything else. I rode out early in the morning, while the town was still sleeping. The traffic lights at empty intersections blinked yellow, like old fishing pier lanterns. The air was cool and a little damp from the night's rain, carrying that fresh June smell, grass, dirt, and the start of something new. I pointed the bike south. No map. No GPS. No plan. Just the road. Just me and my Harley. The first few miles were rough. My body still remembered those months of being stuck indoors, every joint stiff, every muscle groaning. But with each mile, each gust of warm wind, I could feel the rust shaking off my soul, leaving behind nothing but clean, sharp edges. I rode the old federal highways, past endless cornfields, abandoned gas stations, and lonely diners with flickering neon signs. Sometimes the road would climb into low hills, opening up endless views of farmland and sky. Sometimes it dipped down into tiny towns where the main streets had banners that said things like, "Everything must go," or "Best burger in the county." I stopped when I wanted to. At gas stations, to top off the tank and gulp down ice-cold soda. At small diners, where the coffee came in thick ceramic mugs and the omelets were so big they needed 2 plates. On the side of the road, just to pull off my helmet, close my eyes, and listen to the wind rustling the grass. Motel after motel. Bed after bed. Sometimes run-down places, with sagging mattresses and rattling ceiling fans. Sometimes cozy spots, with bookshelves full of dog-eared paperbacks and old ladies behind the desk calling you honey while offering you a plate of homemade cookies. And I loved all of it. Every single minute. Especially the nights. Nights on the road are something else. When you're out there alone, under a sky littered with a million stars. When the headlight carves a narrow tunnel through the dark, and for a while, that slice of road is your whole world. Sometimes I would kill the engine and just sit there in the silence. It wasn't frightening. It felt like home. There were moments when shivers ran up my spine, not from fear, but from something else. From freedom. From real, raw, living freedom. I kept riding, day after day. Crossed through Oklahoma. Dipped into a piece of Texas. Stopped at old bridges, sipped coffee with long-haul truckers at rest stops, swapped stories with strangers I'd never see again. Sometimes it felt like I wasn't just riding down the road, I was becoming part of it. My heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the wheels. The wind whispering my name. And the strangest thing. I hardly thought about Maggie in those first days. Not because I'd forgotten her. No. But because the pain had finally stopped slicing through my chest like a blade. It had settled into something quieter, deeper, like a river running far below the surface. Sometimes I'd wonder if she was somewhere up there in the clouds, smiling down at me. Watching me tear down the highway on that old Harley, my gray hair flying wild in the wind. And sometimes, I found myself smiling back. Every day, I learned a little more about how to just be myself again. Not the broken old man who woke up with shaking hands and a hollow heart. But a man who could pick a direction, twist the throttle, and go. Sometimes along the way I'd stop at abandoned farms, sit on a creaking fence, and watch wild horses graze. Other times, I'd pull into tiny museums where old ladies for $1 would spin you the history of a town no bigger than a postage stamp. Everything felt new. Every day, new roads, new faces, new smells. It was like I was living 10 lives all at once. The Harley ran beautifully. It roared like a wildcat when I opened up the throttle on empty stretches. It purred low and steady when I cruised slow through sleepy towns. Sometimes, when the asphalt was smooth as glass, I would close my eyes for just a second. Only a second. And feel the road singing under me. "You're alive," it whispered. "You're alive again." And I believed it. On the 12th day of my trip, the heat didn't start letting up until evening. The asphalt shimmered like liquid glass under the brutal sun, and my Harley felt like it was gliding across it. I rode slow, no map, no rush, just following wherever the wind pointed me. When the gas gauge started flirting with empty, I peeled off the highway toward a small gas station. One of thousands like it across America, cracked asphalt, a flickering neon sign, and a tiny store selling chips, sodas, and bad coffee. I pulled up to a pump and killed the engine. The bike gave one last low growl before falling silent. By the wall of the building stood 2 bikers, each leaned against their own motorcycles. Both were tough-looking guys, tan and thick around the shoulders, maybe in their early 50s. One wore a vest with a patch that said "Iron Dogs," the other had a battered bandana tied around his head. As I walked by, I gave them a small nod, the universal biker greeting. They nodded back. Then one of them called out, "Hey, old-timer, you heading to the festival too?" I stopped. "What festival?" They exchanged grins, and one of them said, "About a couple miles out of town. Big annual biker bash. 2 days of music, beer, and pure freedom. You gotta check it out." Honestly, I hesitated. I wasn't much for big crowds. Hadn't planned on anything but the open road. But something in their voices, easy, inviting, hooked me. why not? I said. And just like that, I got swept into an adventure I'd remember forever. We rolled out of the station together. My new friends introduced themselves as Duke and Randy. They were loud, a little rough around the edges, but there was something honest about them that I hadn't seen in a long time. The ride to the festival took about half an hour. The closer we got, the more bikers we passed, singles, pairs, whole convoys rumbling toward the same destination. Finally, we turned off onto a wide open field outside of town. And the place was already alive. Trucks and trailers were parked in a rough grid. Music blasted from speakers, grills smoked with the smell of roasting meat. People were pitching tents, stringing up flags with skulls and eagles, blowing up mattresses. The whole air buzzed with the kind of freedom you can't bottle or fake. I killed the engine and swung off my bike, just standing there for a moment, taking it all in. Well. Duke grinned at me. Feels like another world, I admitted. Welcome to the family, old man, Randy laughed. I took a slow walk around. Off to one side, a whole tent city was rising up. On a rough wooden stage, workers were setting up speakers and tuning guitars. More bikes rolled in by the minute, their engines blending into one massive, growling heartbeat. And right then, I realized, I liked it here. There was just one problem, I didn't have a tent. Well, I said to myself, time to fix that. I asked the guys where the nearest store was, hopped back on the Harley, and made a quick run. An hour later, I came back with a cheap khaki tent and a self-inflating mattress. Found a little empty spot between two old trailers. An older couple nearby gave me a friendly nod, and I knew I'd picked the right place. By the time I finished setting up, the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon. At 6 o'clock sharp, the festival kicked off. And it kicked off harder than I ever could have imagined. The music exploded so loud it rattled the trailer walls. A local rock band, kids no older than 20, climbed up on stage, leather vests, torn jeans, and lit the place on fire. The crowd moved like a single living thing. Some people danced right there between the motorcycles. Some built fires and circled around them. Some tapped into giant kegs and poured beer into plastic cups like there was no tomorrow. I stood back for a while, just watching. And slowly, it hit me, nobody cared how old you were here. Young, old, men, women, none of it mattered. Respect and fun. Those were the only two rules. I saw women in leather corsets and full-sleeve tattoos, men with beards down to their waists, barefoot girls dancing wild in the dust. They laughed, they sang, they shouted, they hugged. And without even realizing it, I was part of it too. I struck up conversations with two bikers from Montana, a bartender girl, even a retired history professor riding an old Indian. Everyone was somebody. And yet, out here, nobody was better than anybody else. The spirit, the freedom, the brotherhood in the air. I didn't know life could feel this way. I forgot about the depression. Forgot about the loneliness. Forgot about all those months of silence. I was part of something bigger again. Something real. The festival went on for 2 full days. 2 unforgettable, roaring, beautiful days. And every single minute, I knew, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The festival spun like a wild carousel, and I was right in the middle of the whirl. Everything blended together, the roar of engines, the blast of music, the smell of grilled meat and hot asphalt. Guitar riffs crashed down from the stage like ocean waves, sometimes slamming over you, sometimes pulling back to let you breathe. It didn't take long before I got swept up. The moment you stopped for even a second with a beer in your hand, someone would come over. Hey, where you from? What kind of Harley you riding? First time here. I talked to everyone, bikers from Oregon, a 70-year-old grandmother who rode in on an Indian Scout, even a retired trucker who looked more like a pirate captain than anything else. One character stood out, a big, mustached guy named Chris who had hauled his bike in on a trailer because, as he put it, my back ain't what it used to be. He wore leather pants and a vest with no shirt underneath, and he told stories with so much energy that he drew a crowd wherever he went. Last year, he bellowed over the music, I got so drunk, I woke up married. Took me 3 damn days to figure out to who. The crowd roared with laughter. Near the stage, between the trailers, a little makeshift market had sprung up, tents selling biker vests, skull pendants, leather belts, and bandanas. For the first time in what felt like forever, I found myself wanting something just for the hell of it. So I bought a heavy silver ring shaped like an eagle's head. When I slid it onto my finger, it felt like joining something bigger than myself. At night, it got even wilder. When the sun dipped behind the hills, the festival didn't slow down, it only roared louder. Campfires blazed across the field, their flames flickering off the chrome of resting bikes. People danced like mad, some strumming battered guitars, others grilling meat straight over the open flames. I sat by one of the fires with a group of bikers from Texas. They passed around battered flasks of whiskey and swapped stories about their travels, who'd ridden to Alaska, who'd crossed all of Canada. And with each story, each crackling laugh, I felt the old walls inside me breaking down. "You know what I figured out, buddy?" said one of them, a guy with ash-gray hair and a voice like gravel. "Life's too damn short. It ain't about building a house and sittin' in it till you rot. It's about these moments. The road. The people. The wind." I just nodded. Because I already knew it, down to my bones. The next morning, I woke up in my little tent. My head buzzed from the whiskey and lack of sleep, but my body felt light, easy. I stepped outside. The sun was rising slow and lazy over the field, painting everything in soft golden light. The air smelled like coffee, gasoline, and the freedom we'd lived the night before. People were already moving, fixing bikes, brewing coffee over tiny stoves, sitting in camp chairs, smoking, staring quietly at the new day. I sat down in front of my tent, a cup of watered-down tea in my hand, and just watched. The bikes, the people, the thin trails of campfire smoke curling into the sky. And for the first time in a long time, I was happy. The kind of happiness you don't need to shout about. The kind that just fills your chest and settles there, warm and real. By noon, the concert started up again. Young bands, one better than the next. Drums pounding, guitars screaming, bass shaking the ground. People danced, raced their bikes in wide circles around the field, laughed like they had nothing to lose. And I was right there with them. I caught myself laughing out loud, dancing without caring how old I looked, singing along to songs I didn't even know. Later that afternoon, I met her. A blonde woman, maybe around 40, wearing faded jeans and an old biker club t-shirt. She walked right up to me, holding a plastic cup of lemonade. "You must be new around here," she smiled. "That obvious?" I chuckled. "It's in your eyes," she said. "Still got that fire." We talked nearly all day, about life, about roads, about how fast everything changes and how important it is to grab every damn moment. Her name was Lily. She'd ridden her Harley up and down the whole length of California. She had a soft voice and a laugh so contagious you wanted to bottle it and keep it forever. We didn't make any promises. Didn't swap numbers. We just sat together as the sun went down, watching it melt into the bonfires of the festival. And it was perfect. When the second day finally began to fade, I found myself standing by my bike, leaning against the worn leather seat, watching the last fires die out. People drifted away, some to their tents, some just stretched out under the stars. I was tired. Dusty. Smelling like smoke and sweat. And more alive than I had been in years. After 2 days of freedom, dust, and rock and roll, a deep, tired happiness settled inside me. The kind that only comes after you've lived fully, with nothing held back. I packed up my tent, slung my backpack over my shoulder, fired up the Harley, and rolled away from the festival. Carrying with me the smell of campfires, the ringing in my ears, and the 1,000 lights that would burn bright in my memory for a long time. The ride home started off easy. The highway slid beneath my wheels like a lazy river. I wasn't in any rush. I rode the way I breathed, free and slow. The bike purred steady, the engine answering every twitch of my hand. It felt like the Harley was just as happy to be going home as I was. I had covered a good 100 miles when I felt something go wrong. First, a faint shudder through the seat. Then a little jolt, like the motorcycle's heart had stumbled. I eased off the throttle, listened close. And then the Harley coughed and started losing power. One more second, and the engine died completely. I coasted onto the shoulder and shut off the ignition, though the bike had pretty much died on its own. Tried starting it again. Nothing. Just an empty click deep inside. I climbed off and crouched beside the bike. Ran my hand over the hot gas tank. The air around me smelled of gas, oil, and overheated metal. The heart of the Harley had stopped. I looked around. No houses. No gas stations. Just the road stretching out into the horizon, a few scrubby bushes lining the shoulders, and a huge, endless sky overhead. I sat down in the grass next to the bike, stretched my legs out, and stared into the distance. Inside me, there was nothing but silence. Not anger. Not fear. Just peace. Part of the road, I thought. Every road has its stops. Probably half an hour passed. The sun was already sinking toward the horizon, the sky turning a thick, golden honey color. And then I saw him. An old Chevy pickup, rusty and rumbling, kicking up a trail of dust as it rattled toward me. He slowed down when he spotted me, pulled up alongside. A weathered man in a faded baseball cap leaned out the window. "Trouble, buddy?" he asked, smiling like we'd known each other forever. "Yeah," I said. "Motor's dead. Home's still a ways off." He climbed out of the cab and gave my Harley a quick once-over. "Let's throw her in the back," he said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. It took us about 10 minutes. Together, we wrestled the bike onto the old wooden bed and strapped it down with some worn-out ropes. I thanked him. "Where you headed?" he asked, brushing the dust off his hands. I told him the name of my town. He just nodded. "Hop in. I'll get you there." We drove mostly in silence. The pickup groaned and shook over every bump, the old suspension complaining with every mile. But I didn't mind. I stared out the window. Fields. Lonely windmills. A pink sky stretched low over the earth. And my heart felt light. Now and then the farmer would talk about the harvest, about a new cattle barn going up nearby. I half listened. My mind was still on the road. And that strange peace that only comes when you finally stop fighting the way things are. When we pulled up to my house, the sun was hanging low, dragging long shadows across the ground. My house stood there, old and quiet, with its peeling porch and leaning fence. But it didn't feel like a prison anymore. The farmer helped me roll the Harley down from the truck bed. "You'll fix her," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Some things just don't give up easy." I thanked him again. He gave a wave, climbed back into his dusty Chevy, and drove off into the fading light. I stood there alone, my broken bike beside me. And I smiled. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my old bed, listening to the wind whispering through the trees, and thought. No, I couldn't stay here for long. Couldn't sit still between these four walls again. This house wasn't the end of the road anymore. It was just a starting line. I knew it deep down. As soon as I fixed the Harley, as soon as I gathered a little strength, I'd be back on the road. Because out there, beyond the horizon, there were still thousands of miles waiting for me. Roads that were calling my name. Towns waiting to feel my tires roll through. At dawn, I stepped out onto the porch. The air was cool and clean, filled with the smell of grass and morning dew. I poured myself a strong black coffee into an old mug and sat down on the top step. Out there was the road, still empty, still half asleep. My Harley stood nearby, silent and cooling in the early light, but somehow still alive, still waiting. I ran my hand across the gas tank. "We're not done yet, partner," I whispered. And I knew it was true. I'm not the kind of man who stays in one place. I am the road. I am the wind. And there are still thousands of miles ahead of me.